After something of a hiatus from the Australian market, the Skoda Fabia is back in all new generation form, joining the Volkswagen Polo and Audi A1 on the Volkswagen Group's MQB A0 platform. But this car has a few special features that its cousins don't get, including what's under the bonnet of this Fabia Monte Carlo Edition 150, which is the only Fabia that Skoda is going to sell in Australia for the time being. Around 900 of these cars are going to come to this country over the next 18 months or so. So if you're after a little car which is really compact on the outside, 4.1 meters, and really quite large inside, you're going to need to put your name down for one of these things quite quickly, I'd imagine. And the real secret of this car is its 1.5 litre turbo 4-cylinder engine, making 110 kilowatts of power. You can't get that in a Polo, which jumps from an 85 kilowatt 3-cylinder right up to a 147 kilowatt Polo GTI. So you can see where the Fabia is designed to fit in there. Now, this car is full fat. Skoda have thrown everything but the kitchen sink and a panoramic sunroof at it. It's got a very high level of spec, which is important because it's not cheap. This car is $37,990, a big jump over the old Fabia. We're going to find out if it's worth that money in today's video, but I would caution you, and remember, all cars are going up in price. We've got a huge semiconductor and material supply crisis. There's an increasing amount of inflation in the Australian economy, so it's not a complete choice of car manufacturers to be putting their prices up. It's just kind of a function of everything that's going on in the background. But still, is this thing worth 38 grand? We're going to find out today ahead of a drive in the coming months. But before we get started, hit subscribe down below and the notification bell. Before we jump inside the all-new interior of the Fabia, let's have a look at what's under the bonnet. For people that care about what motivates a little car, this is all quite interesting because this is one of the Volkswagen Group's newer engines, 1.5 turbo 4-cylinder. It's called the 1.5 TSI Evo, and it makes 110 kilowatts of power and 250 newton meters of torque. And for a small car like this, 250 newton meters of turbo-fed muscle is actually plenty. It's probably going to put this thing into sort of warm light hatch territory, if not at where cars like the Polo GTI, Fiesta ST and i20N sit. Kind of like a nice middle ground though, so I'm looking forward to having a steer of this car in Australia pretty soon. But more importantly, with the era of $2.20 a litre for fuel, this thing uses 4.9 litres per 100 kilometres. That's the claim, the same as Audi claims for its A3, which is a bigger car with the same engine. So I'm expecting we'll actually be able to do somewhere in the 4s, which kind of makes you go, do you really need something like a Yaris hybrid or a Corolla hybrid when you could be driving, I guess, a more muscular turbo engine instead? So this car's velvet red, nice color. You do pay a little bit extra for that. Red and orange are the only colors that attract a premium price. Every other color is included. And here we have bi-LED headlights, so no crappy halogen bulbs here. Nothing about the exterior of this car screams I'm a light car or a cheap car, which is good because it's not. We do have black trim with a nice fleck in it around the grille, Skoda badge of course, and it's this wider front end styling, and it's a wider car. That's the main difference with the MQB A0 platform. It's lower, it's wider, it looks a bit beefier, the same as we saw with the new Volkswagen Polo a few years ago. Got a black diffuser around the front, 18-inch wheels with Continental Conti Sport tyres, so not messing around with the rubber on this car. That gives you a bit of an idea of what it might be capable of. Monte Carlo badging here on the front fender, black mirrors, and a black contrast roof, which I think suits the car. As we start to walk down, you notice keyless access on the front doors and the boot. That's pretty cool. And I think it's around here, this rear haunch, where the Fabia looks very Audi A1 and really quite premium. And at the back, we've got a whole host of LED lighting as well. While the outside of the new Fabia is longer, lower and wider than the old car, it's really when you step down into this hatch that you realize just how much this badge has grown up since the previous generation. I've already mentioned the keyless entry just through the door handle. That's a really premium feature a Fabia would never have had in the olden days of 5 years ago. But it's when you step down into these high bolstered sports seats and look at this dashboard, which is just laden with the Volkswagen Group's newest technology, but still some intelligent buttons and dials as well, you realize that this is going to be quite a nice package. And of course, it does have quite a long way to convince us that this thing is worth the best part of 40 grand on the road. So how does that campaign get started? Well, it starts with one of the nicest steering wheels in the industry. Skoda do a beautiful steering wheel, leather, perforations, metallic dials. It just looks expensive, it looks premium, and of course it's the thing that you hold on to all the time, so that needs to be good. Not a plastic steering wheel, not something epoxy and vinyl, a really nice premium item. And we're sitting in sports seats. They are cloth, but they've got contrast stitching, they've got kind of red and grey stripes running up the middle of them, and like a Golf GTI or a Golf R, they're this sports bucket coffin style seat with an integrated headrest. That looks really cool. One thing the car's missing is power adjustment for the seats. That's a feature you can get in the A1 and the Polo GTI. Instead we crank it up and down, but we do have niceties like a dial for backrest adjustment, but no lumbar, which is a shame. I think that would probably add to long distance comfort even further in the car. But the seats are heated, controlled through this climate control panel here with, hallelujah, dials for temperature, although you do have to go into the touchscreen to adjust the fan speed, which is a bit of an odd function we're starting to see on a few Skodas. Now the car is DSG automatic only, 7-speed DSG. No paddle shifters is one thing I did notice, but you can change your own gears through the shifter down here if you are so inclined. Now looking further afield on the dash, we've got a high technology package as standard, 9.2-inch Amundsen system, as Skoda calls it, the same as you'll find in an Octavia or a Kodiaq. Just because this is the entry-level Skoda in Australia doesn't mean that it doesn't get the good tech. And then a 10.25-inch virtual cockpit for the driver where you can put a full map, because this car now has standard navigation. But it also has wireless Apple CarPlay and Android Auto and a 6-speaker stereo, but it's not a premium stereo. In the Volkswagen, for instance, you can get a Beats unit. I'm yet to listen to what it sounds like, so I'll make sure to update you on the acoustic when we take this car for a drive for the first time. As for roominess, it feels pretty spacious. This console down here does extend a little bit into the driver's footwell, but for me, it's no issue. It feels open and roomy and airy, although we do have a sporty black headliner, and as I mentioned, no panoramic sunroof is available on this car. The dashboard has this kind of carbon effect, which is semi-soft, hard up here, hard on the doors, but we do have nice chrome door pulls to get out, red detailing down here near the window switches, and it actually says Fabia on the side of the instrument cluster, which I think is a really cool detail you notice when you're walking past the car. And this is a Skoda, so it means we get stuff like an umbrella in the driver's door, really nice when it starts to rain and you're caught short, the car has looked after you, ticket holder on the windscreen, another ticket holder down here where you'll also find wireless smartphone charging, and the car has 4 USB-C ports, so if you run out of juice, you are really trying. Very few Australians still buy a car in the light segment to transport people in the back on a regular basis. But still, it's nice to know that with the new Fabia you can, partially because, while this vehicle is only 4.1 meters long, so you'll get it into inner city parking spaces easily, it's actually got a 2.6 meter wheelbase, which is pretty big for a small car, and that's the reason why I'm able to sit fairly comfortably behind my own driving position, measuring 6 foot tall. You wouldn't say it's, you know, kind of massive in here, because Skoda can sell you a Karoq small SUV or a Kamiq that's a little more generous, but for a light car, something really small, the fact that I do actually have some legroom is a miracle. Tow room is good too, and headroom is absolutely fine, because this car's got quite a conventional roofline and a big glass house, big windows that you can see out of with standard privacy glass on this Monte Carlo. Plus, you get air vents and 2 USB-C ports back here, so clearly some thought has gone into keeping people comfortable in the back. However, I also like the fact that there's a bit of attention to detail. There's a little detachable tray that sits here in what would be the legroom for the person in the center. This car does have 3 seat belts across the back, so you can transport 5 people if you want. But I think Skoda realizes very few people are going to use the middle seat, so it's a bit of extra storage space instead. Both seat backs up front have got a map pocket and a smartphone holder. The only real thing I can ding the Fabia on back here is materials, so you'd expect hard door materials in this segment, but there's also a rock hard armrest in the door and no flip down armrest in the center, so you've just kind of got to have your arms here. But to be fair to Skoda, it's exactly the same case in the Volkswagen Polo. Having had a look at the interior of the new Fabia, let's now head around back and have a look at what's going on design-wise with this small car, because Being a Monte Carlo, it does mean you're going to notice it a bit more from the back, starting with the black lettering, and Skoda is written out in lettering now rather than a centered badge. And we have Fabia down here too, but if you're looking for the Monte Carlo emblem, it's just on the front flanks on both the left and right hand side of the car. But in velvet red with the black, the contrast roof, it all looks quite high end, especially with the LED lighting, which includes the indicators back here as well. So just getting rid of halogen as much as possible, I think really gives these cars a bit of a lift. Now, it's actually what's behind this door which makes a big difference, and that's that the Fabia has a 390 litre boot, and to refresh your memory, a Volkswagen Golf in the size above has a 381 litre boot, not to mention a Mazda 3, which is under 300, a Toyota Corolla hybrid hatch is like 280 or something like that. So a 390 litre boot in what should be in the class underneath all those cars is really quite impressive. It is bigger than the Polo and the A1, and it's largely about the depth. You put things up and over this lip, that is one, I guess, thing to note. We don't have a flush boot floor here, but somehow they've been able to package this much space, but also a space saver spare, and we're reviewing a lot more cars lately that have no spare at all. So I think being able to jam one down in there is pretty cool. Partially that's enabled by the fact that the MQB A0 platform this car sits on has a simpler torsion beam rear suspension than like a Golf or an A3, which have multi-link independent rear suspension, but still. We've got storage off to the left and the right. So many nets. Someone at Skoda Australia loves nets, as do I. Great for a boot, so your groceries are not rolling around. And even nice little hooks that plug into the top tether point. So if you don't need the back seat space for baby seats, you can hook your groceries on there and they're not going to annoy you as you drive home. So those are my first impressions of the new Skoda Fabia Monte Carlo. If you haven't subscribed, do so you don't miss our first drive review in the coming months. Now, Skoda expects to get about 200 of these Monte Carlo Edition 150s in the remainder of 2022, and then around 700 across all of 2023. So not huge numbers, but this is a relatively small segment. But I guess Skoda, Volkswagen, Audi, they realize that there's still buyers in Australia that want these compact cars that you can zip around in, but still have enough muscle for country road driving. As for whether lower end, cheaper versions of the Fabia are going to come to Australia, at the moment the answer is no. And the reason for that is because the factory that builds the Fabia also builds the new Enyaq EV, the Scala hatch and the Kamiq small SUV, and that factory has been maxed out in terms of production for the last 8 years. So it's not like there's heaps of spare capacity in the system to pump out a run of 1,000 base models for Australia. And even if there was, Skoda tells us that buyers don't want that anyway, because when they offer a car which is lower end, apparently no one buys it, because everyone wants to tick all of the option boxes here in Australia. Hence why the only Fabia that we're seeing is one which is the price of this car, which is not cheap. It's a Monte Carlo, it's a 4-cylinder, and it's got all of the options that Skoda could have put inside the car offered on the global palette. So that's an interesting explanation. It's rare that we're given that much insight into why those sort of product planning decisions are made. I find it quite fascinating. Keen to know your views down below in the comments, so make sure to leave them. Don't forget to subscribe, hit the notification bell, and as always, thanks for watching Chasing Cars.